Hello, delighted to be here today, part of this really inspirational event. A little bit about me, I suppose. No, not quite. Here we go. I'm a psychologist by background. I'm not an architect or a designer, and I think I'm the New Zealand element in the international picture today. I guess that, although I've been based here for 30 years. And the last sort of 20 years, I've been working mainly on education projects, learning space projects, helping to design new campuses, new buildings for education, both at the level of schools and universities. So my major client over the last 5 years has been His Highness the Aga Khan, who's developing 7 universities and 25 schools simultaneously around East Africa, Pakistan, Central Asia. And what an amazing vision there educationally. And to be privileged enough to be asked, he bought a mountain in Tanzania overlooking the sort of plains. And I was asked, well, if you could build a university and a school on this beautiful, pristine mountain, what would it be? So to work with the academics there to really imagine what learning spaces could deliver. And that was an amazing journey. That's the only time I've ever been asked to go to a conference in East Africa and asked to speak on East African aesthetics, which was really out of my comfort zone. But anyway, that's now moved on, and I'm now developing briefs for schools, all their future schools in Pakistan and East Africa. So really thinking about what's the relationship between the space, the way they want to deliver their learning and teaching, and the cultural contexts, which are very, very different. So incredibly exciting. And why I get excited by learning is that there's nothing stable in it, as I'm telling you something you don't know, but every aspect of education and learning seems to be in a process of change or transformation. You think about the role of the internet and within universities, within schools, the role of information. Who is the guardian of information? What access do you have to that? How do you deliver it in different ways in your learning and teaching system? How do you understand different ways of learning, different approaches that are not just traditional didactic learning with rows of chairs, for example? Who is the learner? It still amuses me with the universities where you hear people still talking about the student as if there was just this one little group of people that you addressed and you delivered something to. The average age of students in the UK now at the university is over 21. In New Zealand, where I'm from, it's 25. What does that mean in terms of how you use space, how you use time, how you use technology? Same challenges happening in schools, understanding different needs. Don't need to talk to you about financial changes in the UK university system in England. The student has become a customer. Fundamental difference in the way that the university system is functioning. All of a sudden, we've transitioned into a market-led model for delivering education, and universities are competing in a very different way, having a huge impact on space, on buildings, on choices that parents make with universities. This is the positive stuff at the end, though. Where I get really excited is we're moving from a time where education was seen as a series of finite, discrete boxes in people's lives to a much messier situation now, where it's blurred, where people are transitioning always between learning, working, reimagining themselves, and it's a lifelong process. So actually one of my research interests for a number of years has been academic retirement communities. That more than 70 universities in the States have retirement communities on campus to bring whole life learning to its ultimate conclusion. So not that I'll take names for the waiting list anyway. But to me, that's really exciting. How do you use life skills and mentor students and reimagine the relationship between learner and teacher? So incredibly exciting. But where I spend most of my time is thinking about the relationship between pedagogy and space. If we imagine more active learning of just doing things differently, of engaging learners in the process and making them responsible for their own learning, you start to think about more collaborative learning activities, more integrated learning activities. Universities and schools, I'm sure as well, are realizing the interesting stuff is in the gaps. It's not about the defined subjects, it's what are the relationships between subjects. Universities are building specifically around encouraging or forcing interaction between different disciplines, because that's where the ideas come from. And so what can we learn from that, and what spaces will support that sort of coming together? Immersive is really interesting. We're still at a time where a computer is a box on a desk, and we still have the obligatory gaffer tape on the floors. We still have all those things. What would it be like if actually the technology is conceived as part of the learning space, that it's a seamless blended learning experience where the physical and the digital come together to create something that's much better than the sum of the parts? And that's what I'm talking about, the blended as well. Even in the virtual world, even in the digital space, you're still sitting on a chair or standing in a space. So we need to think about the physical and the digital absolutely in parallel. So what that means is a whole bunch of different types of space, a very new space. So we've really got to really challenge every square metre of a school, every square metre of a university, and think about how those spaces can actually deliver more to the learning experience. If you think about what a university is, we typically focus on 15% of the space, which is the formal classrooms, learning and teaching spaces. What's happening in the other 85%? 40% of the space is corridors in a university. What's that delivering? What's the playground in the school delivering to support the learning experience? Every time, if I'm looking at an architectural plan of a new school or a new university, if I see a pot plant has been drawn on the plan, you just have to remind the client that that's about £2,500 worth of architecture that plant is sitting on. So actually, very happy to have a plant there, but what's it delivering? How's it contributing towards the experience of being in the space? What's it doing? Is it just filling up a bit of a corner that you don't know what to do with? So I like to think of every square inch as mattering. And as mattering. This is a really key point. There is not a single stable space type in education. And I don't care whether you're talking about a school or a university or a professional education space. My record for giving a presentation on new ways of learning or new spaces for learning is 7.5 hours of non-stop presentations going through every space type. You'll be pleased to know this is the abbreviated version today. But I just get incredibly excited. What is a classroom today? What is the school library, and how does it engage in the learning process? All of those are up for debate. The great thing is, I've got the opportunity to really explore that in this current project, working with the University of Wales, St David, on an amazing campus. It's not quite as high risk as the mountain in Tanzania. Fewer predators, I would like to think. But what it is an opportunity to do is to create an innovation quarter that takes education as part of a really rich mix of spaces, of types of community, so business, education, leisure, all of these things mixed together to create a new part of the city. And I think that's an incredible privilege to be part of that process. Where I get really annoyed, though, is working with schools or any educational institution who gets excited about innovative spaces. If we look back in time slightly to building schools for the future in England, incredibly interesting spaces created for no particular reason in many cases, that spatial innovation was not thought of as part of a holistic sort of transformation. So we need to have innovation around pedagogy, around curriculum, around use of technology and the use of space. Otherwise we get what I refer to as the purple sofa syndrome, is that just buying purple sofas does not make it an innovative learning space. And it's radical, but it's true. If you go to many university libraries, you'll find banks of purple sofas, thinking that's a learning commons. I'm sorry, it's not. It's a bunch of purple sofas. And so you really need to think about, well, how are those spaces, how is that furniture being used to deliver a different type of learning experience? But where I get really annoyed, if you thought I was annoyed about the purple sofas, what I get really annoyed about is the Xylem Intelligence. It's come up several times today already, is that I'm really lucky that I work in schools, I work in higher education, further education, business, and there's innovation and amazing things happening in each of those areas. There's very little joined up thinking across the different learning spaces. So for example, schools struggle to get decent science spaces, just as an example. Laboratories are expensive, they're difficult to manage, you need skilled staff to run them. If you look at the utilisation of space in universities across the UK, the typical utilisation of a university of teaching space of any type is about 35%. So 65% of all the classroom space, academic space across the country, is empty at any one time. Science laboratories, which are the most expensive types of space in the university, the average utilization is between 10 and 15%. So there's 85% of empty science space across there. And yet here we are in schools struggling to provide a high quality science experience. So I'm really excited about, well, how can we start to merge some of these educational opportunities? UCL in London has done a great thing. They've created an academy where they're actually seriously trying to integrate the learning experiences between the school and the university, so that children get their induction at UCL, not at the school. They use the science labs in senior years. So you're starting to share those spaces and share those experiences and ease that transition between school and education. But there's other really interesting transition spaces as well, between the workplace, between higher education, spaces for innovation, spaces for creativity. And I just really think it'd be a great opportunity, to explore what would it really mean to create what I call a learning-centered community, to actually say, well, if we really believe that learning is at the heart of the future, let's think about spaces and break down some of these silos that we've had to live with for such a long time. What I'm going to do now is to show you a few spaces, learning spaces of different types, both school and higher education, that really inspire me and get me excited for different reasons. But this first one is a place of pilgrimage for any educational space planner, Betterllerup School in Copenhagen, which is a really interesting school which doesn't have classrooms of traditional sorts. It has a whole range of learning bases and home bases and club spaces and what have you. But the architecture is not the interesting thing. What's interesting is that before any teacher is allowed to teach in this school, they get 150 hours of training, skills development on how to use those spaces, to how to deliver a pedagogy that can actually enhance the use of those spaces. What we've seen in the UK is quite often the opposite, is that no skill development is given when there are innovative spaces, and then the building gets blamed. The number of open plan learning spaces that get chopped up and walls put up because they blame the building. Well, actually, if you were delivering a different pedagogy, which that was designed for, perhaps it would behave differently. So the fact that the space and the skills development are connected, I think, is a really important lesson. This is one of my favourite spaces. This is a kindergarten in Invercargill, so it's about as close to Antarctica as you can get. This is in New Zealand. But it's a woodland kindergarten, so they send the kids out into the forest for 2 days of every week. But the reason that's important, under some supervision, I hate it. Although, look, this little 4-year-old's been given quite a large saw, which is interesting. But why this is important is that the ethos of the school, the values, is absolutely about stewardship of the land and about the Maori values, about the environment. And so what they've done is create their entire learning experience about a value set. And access to nature, both within the school and outside the school, is fundamental to that. So I think it's a really important example of how place actually impacts learning, not just space, it's place. This is a meaningful place for learning to occur. Very different context. This is TK Park in Bangkok, which is a shopping centre where they've turned that sort of rubbish top floor of a shopping centre that there always is into a learning space for technology. So it's a library, it's a technology space, it's a place where people can come for after schools clubs. So sort of leisure and learning outside of the formal context come together in this space, which I think is very successful. This is another example of good use of third spaces. This is from Christchurch, where I'm from, Discovery School. I don't know how many of you have heard of Discovery and Unlimited. There were two fantastic schools that took the approach that the city is the school, that children can embrace the city and use city facilities rather than having something called a defined school. So this is the top floor of a department store again. So you just go up the escalators and you arrive at the front door of the school, which is a kitchen. The front gate of the school is a kitchen where children, teachers and parents would meet in the mornings, deliver their children, have a coffee or whatever, and engage in conversation about learning. And a really interesting, and then they went out into the city, used the city libraries, used the city sports ground, and it was a really exciting, personalised learning experience for each of these students. Unfortunately, a good idea is not always enough to keep things going. This is what happened to the school in the last earthquake. Thankfully, no one was killed, but obviously the whole of the city has gone. So they've moved out temporarily to space within a university, which is, I think, a good thing, but it's a temporary thing. As the city gets rebuilt, they're going to reintroduce the school back into the CBD to actually engage with the business community and combine in new sorts of learning spaces. So really exciting in the longer term. Very different type of space again. This is Blizzard, which is part of University of Queen Mary in London. It's a science lab. It's a very serious biomedical science lab for 400 researchers. Very different type of research lab model. And it's called a research hotel. So scientists, professors don't own their lab. As you have a grant, you get issued a number of benches and you use it for the duration of your contract, and then you're out again. So it's very much breaking down the fiefdoms of traditional scientific research. What's interesting though is all the collaboration space that we moved up onto a balcony above that, so scientists can communicate when they're writing out and just see what's going on. There's an air curtain across here that stops any fumes from going above that space, so it's a very connected laboratory space. But what's interesting is these pods hanging from the ceiling, which are their meeting rooms for the researchers, but it's also the centre for the science of the cell. So this is a school educational space where children can come in from the pods, see real science taking place in real time and learn about the cell. So it's from a very early age bringing higher education and schools together in a very interesting way. Different again, this is a train, but it's a learning space. It's a particularly interesting one. I worked for a number of years with Aalto University in Helsinki, and they have a very entrepreneurial culture. And this is the Entrepreneurial Society of Aalto University, who decided that they wanted to go to Shanghai to see the Shanghai Design Festival when it was on. So they went out and they raised, without any university participation, they raised 350,000 euros to rent a train from the Russian State Railway. They then developed their own curriculum and chose their faculty from across the university that they wanted to go with them on the train. And then I think 250 of them piled onto the train and they headed across Mongolia for 10 days, where they defined the learning experience, got out, did case studies. They actually tested a number of apps for Nokia on the way. They did this is a TED talk that they did from the train. And then they arrived in Shanghai 10 days later, different people. It's an incredibly empowering learning experience. And the following year, the Chinese took the train back again. And then the following year after that, they rented an ocean liner and went to Brazil. So every year now, they're just breaking the learning experience out of the container and doing it anywhere, anytime. I think really exciting. Just a couple more. Natural History Museum as a learning space, very interesting because it's all life, it's all age learning. You've got it as an entertainment space for children, for families, whatever. It has school programs supporting the curriculum. It has 2 master's degrees that are run from there on taxonomy, and 250 PhDs underway, all simultaneously in the same space at the same time, with just different learning journeys through that space simultaneously. So I think the idea of cultural spaces as learning spaces, not just the annual school trip, it could be used in very different ways that I think are very enhancing. So I'll save the best to last, my favourite learning space. This is Bridge School in a place called Qiashi in China, very remote village in the middle of nowhere in China. And historically, the village has been there for about 500 years. There are 2 families who have been warring for the entire time. They hate each other. And they live in these 2 big communal han houses, one on each side of this big ravine, which is flooded for half the year. So there's no connection between the 2 halves. This architect came and said, I know how we can change this. They built the school, the Bridge School, across the ravine. And this is the first bridge for 400 years that has joined the village back together again. And the school consists of 2 classrooms with a school library in the middle. And so you suddenly have learning absolutely at the heart of the community. Each end, that's the end of, there's one of the communal houses, so it's one of the factions, and there's a matching one on the other side of the ravine. The end of the school opens up to create a performance space. There's 2 performance spaces, a library and 2 classrooms. And it's absolutely changed. There's one of the classrooms. It's changed the village. Not only has it changed education, but it's actually revitalized the village because it won the Aga Khan Award for architecture. So it's now got a new economy based solely on architecture students making pilgrimages to see the school. And so it's regenerated the community in a very interesting way. So that, to me, talk about learning-centered communities, that's absolutely the best example you'll ever see. So just to conclude, you can tell I still get excited by learning spaces. It gets missed out of the picture so often when you talk about innovation and education. Absolutely understand the pedagogy and technology and all of those issues, but so often space is missed out, and it can contribute. You can't make a great school out of great spaces, but it can support greatness in pedagogy in very interesting ways. So I think you have to really think about those four things in balance. It's about, do you have the right spaces? Are they the right size? Are they efficient? Do they work? Are you getting good value for the money that you spend on the estate? But place is just as important. Is it well designed? Does it tell good stories? Does it express values and ideas that you really want to celebrate? And then process, the pedagogy, the learning and teaching delivery. And lastly, the experience, the whole process of getting to the space, getting into it, leaving it, experiencing it. All of those things work together, or have to work together. And I think that would be a worthy subject of further exploration through the Institute over time. So I'll leave it at that point and hand over to Kate, who will build on what I'm saying, I hope, around creativity and learning and the importance of experience. So thank you very much.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very pleased to be here today, and I was very inspired by some of those pictures as well, as I'm sure all of you were. I think you might have been sitting down too long. And please don't hate me, but I'm going to ask you to stand up. So everyone up, because you have been doing a lot of sitting down. My height. Okay, and now I would like you to sit down if you don't think of yourself as creative. So stay standing up if you do think of yourself as a creative person. Sitting down if not creative, standing up if creative. Well, that's very interesting. The front have sat down and the back have... So it's just, we've got, I don't know, I can't see, is anyone sitting down at the back? One of the Peter's doing some pointing. It's not intended anyway to just name and shame or in any sense. I just think it's an interesting benchmark kind of positioning to take, and also got you on your feet for just a second, so you can all sit down now. So from one of the lovely people at the front who didn't stand up, can I ask one of you perhaps what creativity therefore means to you? What, because you don't think you are creative, so what does it mean to you? Very interesting. Anybody else who... okay, we'll hold that thought. Anybody over here, if you didn't stand up, another reason why, or what you would define as creative? Design and making. Okay, do you make ideas? Yes, okay. Anyone who stood up at the back who, well, I mean, from the second row backwards. Pretty much everyone stood up. Anyone who thought they were creative? Someone over there, yes. Teaching maths A-level. Very, very good. And someone from the very back. Anyone near the back who is hiding? Someone in glasses at the back. I can see a couple of people in glasses, so one of you has to commit. Go on, someone at the back. Lovely, thank you. You don't have glasses, that's okay. Entrepreneurial skills, lovely. And do you have a kind of entrepreneurial background? Oh, very good, lovely. Okay, so I thought if we're going to be talking about creative learning, we should think about what creativity is. And oh, here we go. So here's just a few ideas of what it might be. Lovely. So it's a funny word, isn't it, creative? And it means different things to different people. So to help us locate ourselves with regards to what we think about creative learning, let's look at One definition. Okay, so here we've got the CCE, the International Foundation of Creative Learning, and they've stated in one of their reports that creative learning was widely understood to be characterised as questioning and challenging, making connections and seeing relationships, envisaging what might be, exploring ideas, keeping options open, reflecting critically on ideas, actions, and outcomes. Now, to me, that just sounds like really just like good education. Like, isn't that kind of what education should be? So education really should be, I don't know if anyone here disagrees with me. Wonderful, so you're all signed up to creative learning. So there we go. So creative learning is these things, and you know, you don't need me to explain to you why didactic, pedagogical approaches, which see students as a vessel in which to have knowledge poured into them, are reductive and actually ineffectual, and often they kind of isolate people and you know, don't engage them as well. So I think it's important to be thinking when we think about learning, creative learning doesn't just engage the mind in educational processes, it broadens it as well, doesn't it? It broadens it and prepares it for the challenges of working and living and being. And I think we've been talking today about people's kind of moral and social responsibility. That surely is what we were thinking about. And actually, I think it's really important as well to say that learning isn't just about the journey towards knowing. It's about not knowing as well. It's about grappling. And it's about finding a place and a way of being in now and how we manage that, how we manage this, you know, the world that we're living in at this time. So I'm talking about creative learning today, but I think it's also really important to talk about arts education. Because there is a distinction here, and I don't want to overlook it. So at a time when over the border in England, I've been witnessing the arts being systematically decimated from the curriculum. So well done, Wales. It's really important to keep it as part of the conversation. So when we're talking about creative learning, much of the conversation around that is often framed around skills, the acquisition of skills. Contrastingly, I think arts education, although obviously accruing specific skills, is also about enrichment. So it's thinking about social engagement, cultural understanding, and obviously through the arts we engage with others, yes, but we also engage with ourselves more deeply on a deeper level, and you know, in ways that other aspects of the education system don't always do. So I'll be talking about the evidence for arts education more specifically in a minute. But before that, I think it's important to think about practically what form does creative learning take in arts education. So, God, no, it's a little bit participatory because I just felt like I couldn't stand up at the front and talk about creative learning at you, because that would just be just ridiculous and a little bit painful. So can anybody, I'm going to ask you in a second to turn to the person next to you just for 30 seconds. Can anyone remember a lesson that they really enjoyed at school? Extra marks if it was primary school. I realise for some of you that will be longer ago than others. No, I'm only teasing. So I'll give you an example just to kick you off. So when I was at primary school, I remember that in a maths lesson, we had to design and decorate our bedroom. So we had to go home and measure all of the walls. And then we had like an Argos catalogue and stuff. And we had to work out exactly how many tins of paint we'd need to paint the walls. And our teacher gave us a fictitious budget. And we had to plan the furniture, etc. So that's a lesson that I remember enjoying, a maths lesson, no less, that I remember enjoying at primary school. So 30 seconds to the person next to you. Can you remember a lesson at school that you enjoyed? A lesson, not like I hated my teacher, or this person really embarrassed me, but a specific lesson. Can you remember one? Just 30 seconds to the person next to you. Wonderful. Okay, I hate to bring you back together because actually there was a lovely amount of lively chatter there. And that might just be because you've been sitting still quietly for a long time, but I'm sure it was on task. And has anybody got one that their partners just told them that they thought was really interesting? Let's see if you're listening. Anyone that their partners just told them that they thought was interesting or good? Even a little bit? Yes. Active classes. Yeah, so not just sitting down. You remember those once more, that we physically engage our bodies in the process and we get up and we do things. Yeah, perfect. Similarities there with anyone else? Home economics classes, did you? Did you have a washing up liquid fight? I did that. No? It's not really engaging the learning process though, is it? Anyone else got an interesting one? Singing together in primary school. It was interesting when Louis mentioned the song for the provinces. I remembered that in my GCSE Humanities, we were taught the Gulf War song, which was in 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and it went on to a well-known tune. And pretty much everyone did really well in that test. Okay, any others? Any other differences? Well, oh yes, one at the back, yes. Learning dances from 1920s, wonderful, yes. Oh, very interesting. Okay, so you're not disproving my point, which I'm pleased about. It's always tricky with audience participation, isn't it? 'Cause, but I'm glad you kind of saying what I thought you would say. A lot of it is cross-curricular. So that thing I said about the maths lesson, that was cross-curricular. A lot of it is being active or engaging the senses in different ways. That's creative learning, and often you've also mentioned the arts, haven't you? So I work in primarily in drama and creative writing as well. And for example, I'm not putting this as an example of best practice or anything, just I'm giving an example of a workshop I did recently. We're working with year 6s going into year 7 to prepare for them for that experience. And we did a big kind of imaginary board game across the floor of the whole room, and they were in teams, and they had to, it was like a snakes and ladders basically. So they did a drama activity that was like, what will you do? You miss the bus, and then we kind of come up with all these different kind of doing and kind of get in a game way, and if they got points they went up the ladder, and if they went down the snake, and the snake would be things like, you forgot your trainers for PE, or things like that. So they were engaging in the process, it was physical, it was active, and it was using different kind of arts and creative learning techniques. So in terms of the evidence of the impact of arts education, I think it's really important to say that the arts, obviously the lovely Sir Ken. Peter said that I went to meet him. Peter Robert at the back, sent me to a conference with the intention of making friends with Sir Ken Robinson. That was just my task for the day, which I succeeded in. I messaged him a picture of me and Ken later on, being like, success. But I haven't included that picture, he said I should. Okay, so thinking about the evidence, so academics, so school, children who engage in drama, music and dance, often score more highly in reading, writing and maths, boom. Then thinking about those transferable skills, visual analysis, better critical judgments, communication skills. I don't need to explain to you why those are the case and why they're useful in life. And then also thinking about the social and personal, so higher attendance, learning from mistakes, connecting to the larger world and the community, social development, and I've put a sense of well-being there as well, because, and we have touched on this today and I'm really pleased about it, we are, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that we're facing a mental health crisis, particularly amongst the young. And actually, if we're educating young people, we kind of need to make sure that they're well as well, so we can educate them. And there is a broad body of evidence about how the arts engender and foster a sense of well-being. I would highly recommend Creative and Credible as a website that has a load of that kind of information. So going a bit deeper with an example from drama and theatre, because that's my kind of primary discipline, we can think about how myth and metaphor can encourage empathy, and I was really pleased earlier to hear that being listed as a key global competency. So playing a character, so taking on the role of an actor, we've got evidence from the realm of science, and I think it is really important when we're looking at cross-disciplinary work that we practice what we preach. But actually the Antonio Damasio, from his research in 2003, suggests the neurobiological roots of feelings and their consequence for transformation through physical action. And therefore, just by the very sense of taking on a role, we can look at how that can have and like literally alter our neural pathways. Amazing. A bit like Amy Cuddy's research, which some of you may be familiar with, about power posing. So the idea that before you've got a big presentation, I wasn't doing this, but you can sort of stand like this, power posing, and that increases testosterone and it impacts on testosterone and cortisol levels, and that actually increases people's performance. So I don't know if all of the speakers today so far in the toilets were doing this. And if you caught any of them doing it, I congratulate them for implementing scientific research into their day-to-day living. And actually, if you're thinking about the opportunities in drama, we can see the classroom as a rehearsal for life, where we take on roles and attitudes and characters, and we try them out for size and see how it works, but in a safe and in a contained space. So thinking about the value of creativity, Professor Graham Donaldson's Successful Futures report provides a clear endorsement of the value of putting arts and creativity at the heart of the curriculum. I'm just going to read this quote. So the expressive arts provide opportunities for children and young people to explore, refine, and communicate ideas, engaging their thinking, imagination, and senses creatively. Engagement with the expressive arts requires application, perseverance, and close attention to detail, capacities that have benefits across learning more widely. So thinking about the economic and staying in Wales, your ongoing commitment to this agenda. So Nick Capaldi says that now more than ever is the moment to invest in young people's creative capital, unlocking their imagination, vision, and potential. Get it right, and we'll be equipping them with the vital life skills they need for the future, because Wales' economic and social well-being depends on it. Now more than ever. Now, I think that's a really important point. I'm leaning too far towards this. In knowledge-based economies, we're moving from selling goods to selling ideas and services, inventiveness, creativity, and that's across all domains or fields, so including science, technology, engineering, computer sciences, as well as the arts. It's now essential. Those capacities are essential to Western economies. I do think it's important to recognise, though, that they do rely on global inequality. In terms of how that system works, and therefore I think we also need to be thinking creatively about that as well. So thinking about social, there's a social value to creativity. So of course in the way it brings us together, but also because social life requires improvisation, and creativity is a form of cultural improvisation. And I think we have talked about this already today, and I'm pleased, I think, that we've had so many of these reoccurring themes, because I think that kind of suggests that there's a kind of a shared consensus within the room. But I think what I'd like to don't have to say it out loud this time, we'll move around. But I would like you to think about how much the world has changed since you were at school. Now I know, so I'm 28, and when I say to my students that when I was kind of early in secondary school, if I wanted to use the internet, we couldn't use the landline. I mean, they're not sure what that is either. But if I wanted to use the internet, it engaged the landline. You had to listen to a series of beeps and grasshopper noises before you could use it. So I think if we're thinking about educating young people, and these technological processes, they're not slowing down, are they? They're continuing. And actually, I don't know if I can imagine what the world's going to be like in 20 years' time. And therefore, if we're equipping them, and I think lots of education systems don't even do that, equipping them for the world that we live in now, we need to be thinking about how we're equipping them for the future. And we can't do that because we can't picture it. But what we can do is we can think about how we equip people for human progress. And surely that lies in adaptability, in bravery, in curiosity, and in creativity. So whether you stood up or sat down at the start, and I think that probably you are all creative in a whole multiplicity of ways, regardless of your subject discipline. I do urge you to think creatively about the future of education in Wales and to put creativity at the heart of it. Please and thank you.